Hello and welcome back to the On the Grid podcast, hosted by me, Ethan Evans, and joined today with the founder, Mr. Adrian Kita. How are you today, my friend?
Yeah, it's weird to be sat in the co-host seat. Technically I'm still the host, but technically you've taken duties this week, which I'm happy to do. But yeah, I'm good. We're finally back. Race weekend this weekend, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
It feels so good to say the words, it's race week. It's felt like months and months and months. So coming up on today's podcast, we will be going over the testing session from Bahrain, the liveries, and some Bahrain predictions for this weekend. Starting off with the testing. Now, 3 days didn't seem like enough for many of the teams, many of what they're reporting. One team that it did seem enough for is Red Bull. Now, they looked dominant. They look like they're going to continue their form from last year, as I'm sure many fans of including ourselves, will not be happy about. Talk to me about Red Bull then. What was their testing like? Is it as good as it seems, or is it kind of other teams are holding a bit back?
From Red Bull generally, they had, I think, one of the most run-ins throughout the 3 days. I don't know how many laps they clocked, but Verstappen did a lot in day one. Perez did a lot in day three, and as a collective on day two, they did a lot of running as well. But Perez looks like he's at one with that car. He looks absolutely incredible. Obviously, he set, I believe it was a 1:30.3 that he set, which is by the way 2 tenths, 2 and a bit tenths quicker than the pole time last year by Charles Leclerc. Which to me, straight away, being a Ferrari fan, alarm bells are ringing. You're thinking that he's probably gone for a quickest lap, but that car is probably not race trim ready. Probably setup will differ for the Grand Prix weekend. But the Verstappen and Perez and Red Bull just look like they are flying. Even with their wind tunnel time that they've had cut because of their overspending during the 2021 season, they still look on top. They still look like they're going to be the top team, and it looks like everybody's going to be trying to catch Red Bull once again.
You should mention that about the reduced wind tunnel time. You wouldn't know it just looking at sort of the reports post testing. It is going to be interesting to see what, if any, impact that does have, though. I think it's you also mentioned about Perez looking very strong and at one with the car. We kind of saw that at the start of last season. Hopefully, he can bring a bit more of a fight to Verstappen and kind of put a cat amongst the pigeons there and disrupt things a little bit, make it a bit interesting. Because if testing results are to go by and Red Bull do have the quickest car, I mean, 2 seasons of Verstappen winning 14 races, it would be nice to have an inter-team battle and to have the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes, who we'll go on to in a minute, competing. What about so in terms of this wind tunnel time, obviously it's 25% reduction. Is that something that will show up immediately, or is that something we could see throughout the season, maybe that it don't develop at the same rate?
Well, I think, like you pointed out just there, I think it will hinder their development quite considerably, I think, because I think compared to a team like Aston Martin, who finished near the back end of the grid last season, I think they've got something like 100 less hours compared to Aston Martin, which, if you're looking at developing a car throughout a season, they've got to specifically pinpoint what they want to improve and when they want to improve it. They can't be doing like an Aston Martin and just be not being wasteful with it, but being more. But Red Bull have got to be more strategic with it instead of an Aston Martin approach, where they can test one or two components over and over again. If you get what I mean, it's going to be harder for Red Bull to develop. But I think with with their development, they always somehow just pull everything out of the bag. Like we saw last season, the season before, they've been very good progressing the car throughout the season. But it'll be interesting to see what the wind tunnel time that they've got will it hinder their car? Will nothing happen, or will it just be normal and they can develop the car as they have done? But at this rate, it's a bit uncertain of what's going to happen. But hopefully for the other teams on the grid that are hoping to dethrone Red Bull, it will be a bit of a hindrance for them.
Yeah, they almost have to make every single run, every single minute of that wind tunnel time count to keep up with the likes of Aston Martin, as you said, who we'll definitely be getting onto later on in the podcast. Moving on to your team, Ferrari. Now, for me, they seem to have a good testing. Carlos Sainz, especially, I think. What is your diagnosis of Ferrari's 3 days in Bahrain?
Once again, I think very valuable time on the track for both drivers. I think Fred Vasseur coming in, especially making the cuts that he has made and employing the people that he has. I think it will be very helpful in the team just to stabilize the team after what happened last season, and hopefully bring back the glory days at Ferrari. But I think the 3 days in Bahrain have been a bit of an eye-opener again for Ferrari. I think they clocked one of the top speeds in Bahrain, which you're expecting Ferrari, especially with them fixing their reliability and their power in their engines, which is good to see. But obviously they went that far off the pace on day 3 compared to Perez. It is 7/10, but then again, race trim and whatnot will come into play. So I think both drivers will be happy with the car, but it's just about taking it race by race. I think with Leclerc and Sainz, especially with there not being a clear number 1 and a number 2 there, I think they can both head into the season with a level playing field, and hopefully they have a car underneath them that can propel them to glory once again.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ferrari do look far and away the second biggest team, but you do mention that we don't know about the runs that these teams are doing, the fuel load, handbagging. So as long as they're getting in the lap times, proving that their engine is reliable, which has been a bit of a question mark over Ferrari last year, with them having to turn down the engine come the end of the season, it is a little bit of a concern. So hopefully if they iron out those reliability issues, which, the drivers seem to think they have, then they could turn that engine back up and compete with the Red Bull, which for last season seemed to have the quickest car in a straight line for many of the races. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic unfolds. So moving from 2 teams who have had a pretty good testing, you'd have to say, to a team which I don't know if they've had a good or a bad testing, to be honest. Mercedes. Now, it seemed to be very, very mixed. Day 1 and day 3 seemed to be like they got some good data, they got some good running. Day 2, they were nowhere. They were out of there. Hamilton did have some good race runs on day 3, but there's a danger here that they might be slipping back to 4th, not competing for 3rd, or not competing for 1st and 2nd even. What are your thoughts?
I'd have to agree with you there. I think on day 1, the Mercedes was relatively good. Obviously, the first day of testing is always having the time management, the fuel management, those type of stuff. But on day 2, reliability just hit Mercedes like a truck, especially with Russell. The first part in the morning, Mercedes were okay behind the wheel of Lewis Hamilton. He obviously recorded 72 laps. But in the afternoon is where the troubles started, with Russell only gaining 26 laps on the board, and obviously having to back out of the session. I think it was an hour and a half before its ending, due to some mechanical problems in the Mercedes car. But then day three, I think the issues were fixed again, and Hamilton set the second quickest time of the day. So it's tough on that standpoint, because Mercedes, you could say, are sandbagging once again. Everybody's claiming that Mercedes are sandbagging, but I think in race trim, I think it looks like a good car. Like I said, Hamilton setting a 1:30.6 in the afternoon of day three, only 3 and a bit tenths behind Sergio Perez's time. So I think it's, well, like I said, once again, it'll go down to the races and whatnot. But it's been a bit of a mixed bag of emotions for Mercedes, that's for sure. But I don't think they've hit the dizzying heights that they could have from the 3 days.
Yeah, that 1:30.6 set by Lewis Hamilton, less than a tenth off Charles Leclerc's pole position time from last season. It is a worry with Mercedes. Now, in years gone by, you would say, "Oh, it's Mercedes. They're trying to fool everyone. They've got a good car. They'll switch it on." Last season, that would have been the thought process if last season didn't happen. Now, I think there is a bit of a worry with, especially with the team who we'll mention later on, that they might be slipping back. Both drivers reporting that the porpoising issue seems to be fixed. We did see a few cars struggling with the bouncing, but they seem to have fixed that issue. But one of the big things I think they said is that the balance, they seem to have the same balance issues, which they were struggling with last season. So that is definitely a concern. So moving from one unknown to another, Alpine. Now, from everything I've seen about reporting about testing, this seems to be the biggest mystery on the grid. They could be the fourth quickest car. They could be the ninth quickest car. We really don't know. What they completed the second lowest amount of laps, I think, over the course of testing. I'm sure you can confirm that. What's going on at Alpine, essentially?
I don't even think I can answer that one. It's a tough one to answer, because I don't think they had many representative times set on the board. From what I can see, the quickest lap that they had was a 1:32.7, I believe, from Gasly on day three, which is like, we're talking a 2 second margin from Gasly's time and Perez's time on day three. I think we'll get on to another team that also struggled, but them and McLaren, I think, have struggled the most through testing. I don't think they've maximised the track time that they could have. And I think generally throughout testing, Alpine struggled. But then again, I think last season they weren't at the best throughout testing, but then we saw what happened. So it's very hard to distinguish with Alpine, because in testing a team doesn't turn up and then throughout the season they're all good and all fine. So I don't think they got the data that they needed, but I think that they will be okay come the Bahrain Grand Prix. Fingers crossed. I think Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, the French duo, albeit they don't like each other too much from the past, but I think they're a capable duo of propelling Alpine to potentially battle for third with Mercedes, if Mercedes are as bad as they look throughout testing. But then again, I don't think Mercedes are going to be down in third. I think they'll be fighting for first and second. I don't think the black arrows, shall we call them, the silver arrows / black arrows, because they're in a black livery. We'll obviously talk about the livery very shortly. But yeah, Alpine have struggled throughout testing, but I think they'll be okay come the start of the season.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention the duo of Gasly and Ocon. I do think they are one of the best or the most underrated pairings on the grid. I think they're both fantastic drivers, and we'll have to wait and see. Now, you did mention McLaren. I think we should move on to them now. I don't think if you're looking at an ideal testing session, there's only one weekend of testing this year. Usually there's two. I don't think it could get worse than McLaren's testing this year. You've got Lando Norris punching walls. You've got a completely different concept to last year, struggling to get out with it, not getting the lap times they need, struggling with the reliability. It just seems like it can't get any worse, can it?
McLaren are a bit of a mess, and I think they are going backwards very quickly. It's very hard to see what's happening at McLaren because obviously with Lando as the number one driver this season, you were kind of hoping that maybe he'd propel the team even further up the grid. But at this rate, I think it'll be a tough struggle for McLaren. I think Aston Martin, we're going to move on to them very shortly as well. I think Aston Martin will possibly eclipse them. I think Alfa Romeo look very quick, and I even think the Williams looks even better than the McLaren at the moment. Obviously, it doesn't help having Oscar Piastri having to teach him everything and obviously get him on board with the ideas and whatnot. Having a rookie on board will be tough for McLaren, but they've seriously got to they've seriously had to maximize that 3 day period of testing to obviously better their car. But it looks like seriously they might be looking over their shoulders and going even backwards.
Yeah, there seems to be a real worry from McLaren that they're not just slipping back sort of to fifth or sixth, that they're slipping back to sort of eighth or ninth, quickest car on the grid. That would be a real concern. Moving on to Aston Martin, the best pre-season testing on the grid. So from the worst to the best, Alonso's race runs. Now, I was listening to what Ted Kravitz had to say. From his race runs, if the Bahrain Grand Prix happened at the weekend, from the times he was putting up, the podium would have been Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso. Now, this is just completely proven my predictions that we done last week out in the bin. I didn't think he'd be close to that sort of level, but he's showing Fernando Alonso just, we'll have to wait and see some races before we get too ahead of ourselves. But he's showing that Aston Martin, if it is as good as people are thinking it is, there's a chance he can get podiums and even wins this season.
One thing that is a shame, Vettel decided to retire a year early. If Vettel waited a year and Lance Stroll getting gone, like a Seb Alonso partnership in the Aston Martin would be fantastic at this point, because I think that Aston Martin is a fantastic car by the looks of Alonso driving it. Even Felipe Drugovich. I think Felipe Drugovich also did a very handy job for Aston Martin. Obviously, he wasn't quicker than Alonso, shall we say, but he set some all right times, a 32.0 on the final day of testing, which obviously is about 1 and a bit seconds behind Perez's time. But still, I think Aston Martin have what it takes to potentially step up and move ahead of your McLaren, and potentially even challenge Alpine. I say that midfield battle looks very tasty this season. You've got so many cars that could potentially finish fourth, and even potentially even challenge the top three, because Aston Martin, like I said, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, are looking very tasty ahead of a new season. But Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, I think we'll be looking at consistent points finishes from Alonso, and and maybe even a few podiums here and there.
Yeah, you talk about Felipe Drugovich. It's looking highly likely that Lance Stroll is going to miss not only the Bahrain Grand Prix, but also maybe the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, possibly even moving into Australia in the third race of the season. If reports are confirmed and that he has broken both wrists. I mean, putting all bias aside, Drugovich has come in and shown that he is a very good driver. He's a very promising driver. He won the F2 championship last season. It is a shambles that he hasn't got a seat on the grid this year. If he goes and puts himself, picks up decent points in the Aston Martin, which at this stage is looking at least the fourth quickest car. I mean, as much as the Lance Stroll is the owner's son, surely you have to take a look, especially if Stroll comes back and doesn't perform. Surely you have to take a look and say, we're missing out on a lot of points here in a tight midfield battle. That can be the difference between fourth and seventh.
Unfortunately, Lawrence Stroll is not going to do that. It's his son, and he is not going to demote his son. As much as I would love to see it, because Felipe does deserve a seat on the grid. You don't win F2 and you don't get a seat. Like we saw Oscar Piastri, what happened to him? He won 2021. He had a year out, and now he's back in 2023 in arguably a truck of a McLaren car, where it could have been in a decent 2022 car, 2022 McLaren car instead of Daniel Ricciardo, for example, or even Fernando Alonso or Esteban Ocon when he was at Alpine. But I think Felipe has shown himself as a true talent, and I think it'll be hard for him to get a seat on the grid next season because Stroll's not budging anywhere. Alonso, I believe, is on a multi-year contract, so unless he finds a seat elsewhere, it's going to be tough for him. But if he proves himself throughout this weekend and maybe even next weekend when we head off to Saudi Arabia, I think jobs are good and for Felipe. He might get a seat, but it's looking increasingly unlikely for him to get a seat in 2024. But never say never.
Well, one race was enough for Nick de Vries to find a seat in F1. So who knows with Felipe Drugovich? Hopefully he can he can continue his good form into the race on Sunday. Moving on to Alfa Romeo. Now, I think they've gone a little bit under the radar. There seems to be a lot of promise from Alfa Romeo. Both Bottas and Zhou had a lot of good running. Could they get in the mix, be competing for points come the start of the season?
Do you want a simple answer? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. That is the answer. Yes. I mean, Alfa Romeo have had very good running during the testing, and I think they're another team that can fight up the top end of the midfield alongside Alpine and Aston Martin. I think Bottas especially is his mullet, his locks, and his beautiful mustache are going to propel Alfa Romeo to, I'd arguably say, fifth or sixth place in the constructors. I think Guan Yu Zhou as well. I think he's done a stellar job during testing, and I think Alfa Romeo are increasingly looking likely to fight with Alpine and Aston Martin for fourth, fifth, and sixth.
One team that may be able to throw themselves in the mix, Haas. What do you make of them? They seem to have very solid testing, very different to the drama and all of the turmoil that was going on 12 months ago. Could they compete? They've got two very solid drivers, two proven Formula One drivers over the course of the last decade. Can they throw themselves into the mix? Can they perform similarly to Alfa Romeo and sort of compete for fifth and sixth?
I think it will be increasingly unlikely for them to fight for fifth and sixth, but with Hulkenberg and Magnussen, I don't think they're out of it completely. I think the car's decent. It wasn't too bad during testing. Obviously Magnussen K-Mag set at 131.3 on the third day, and Hulkenberg set at 133. But obviously it varies. It depends on the race runs and whatnot. But I don't think they'll do too badly. I think Haas have the possibilities of fighting for fifth and sixth if they develop their car at the rate Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin do. Like, I believe Haas stopped developing their car midway through the 2022 season to focus on 2023. So if that's the case and they've put all their eggs in one basket for 2023, then I think they've got no reason to not battle for fifth and sixth. It'll be tough. It'll be a tough ask, but I think they've got two very capable drivers of doing it.
Well, you would have thought so. Like I said, they've got two very experienced drivers that they brought Hulkenberg in to deliver more points, to be a more consistent driver. Our penultimate team to talk about here, AlphaTauri. It seemed to be a little bit lackluster for AlphaTauri. They didn't seem terrible, but they just didn't seem to hit the heights of other teams, such as your Haases, your Alfa Romeos, your Aston Martins. Is it going to be they're fighting over getting out of Q1, or could it be that on their day, if they can put some good laps in, they've got two drivers who seem to be very quick. Can they get amongst the midfield, or is it going to be back of the pack for them?
I think we had a brief conversation after day one, and I said AlphaTauri looked like an absolute truck. They looked awful throughout day one and the morning session of day two. But then De Vries put a 32.2 on in the afternoon on day two, and I was thinking, okay, something could happen here. And then Tsunoda on day three set a 131.2 in the afternoon. So it once again it depends. On the day, maybe they could set blistering lap times and they can set the world alight, and hopefully Tsunoda and De Vries can strike a good partnership. But from the first day of testing, I'll say day and a half of testing, they didn't look brilliant. But they obviously had a lot of running during testing, so I think they've taken a lot of valuable information from the 3 days, and I think they could go back to their camp, look over the data, and see what they're missing from their package and what they need to improve ahead of Bahrain and ahead of the whole season.
And last but not least, Williams. Now, Williams do it. I think we were both concerned in our 20-1 how far off the pace they would be. They didn't seem to look too bad. They definitely didn't have the worst testing in the world. Albon, was Albon, and Logan Sargent as well looked to have put in some decent maps. He seemed in the first day, I think in the morning session, he was sort of third or fourth. So is it looking up for Williams, or are they like AlphaTauri just resigned to the back of the grid?
I think like you pointed out there, Logan Sargent, I think, impressed during testing. Obviously in day two, in the morning session, not day one, day two of the morning session, he set the second quickest time in the morning. He was only 600ths behind Carlos Sainz, who set the quickest time in the morning. But I think all of the teams, especially AlphaTauri, Williams, McLaren, I think those three teams are going to potentially be in a bit of an inter-team battle. But Williams look strongest out of those three teams. with ability, with Albon's stability, and maybe even the rookie, the know-how of Logan Sargent. He's going to be out there to prove a point, because Oscar Piastri proved a point. He won the F2. He won the F2 championship. De Vries obviously won Formula E, and Logan Sargent only came fourth in Formula 2 last season. So he's going to be out there to prove a point, and I think he's done that exactly during testing. Obviously, hopefully he carries that on into the new season, and he can score points regularly. But it remains a bit of an unknown for Williams. They had good pace throughout day 2 and day 3, but will they be at the back of the grid once more? We'll have to wait and see.
Only a few days to go until we do find out. Very quickly, I want your 10-1. So how you think the cars will be in terms of pace for in Bahrain alone, not over the course of the season, in Bahrain. So you're 10-1.
You put me on the spot here. I've not done any preparation for a 10-1. He's put me on the spot. Red Bull number 1, Ferrari number 2, Mercedes number 3. I will go with Aston Martin number 4, Alpine number 5, Alfa Romeo number 6, McLaren number 7, AlphaTauri number 8. I'll go AlphaTauri number 8, Haas number 9, and Williams number 10.
Very interesting. So my 1 to 10. So the first 3 is exactly the same. Well, top 4 actually are exactly the same. Got Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Alpine in 5th. I've got Haas in 6th. I think with the experience of their drivers, I think they'll be up in 6th. Alfa Romeo 7th, McLaren 8th, AlphaTauri 9th, and Williams dead last. Okay, now moving on from the pre-season testing to the liveries. Now, this was originally going to be a podcast in its own, but we're going to do this now. So let's start off with the first team to unveil their livery. So we'll go for Haas F1. I have to say, when it was first released, I did like this livery. But as time's gone on and more cars have just gone for put more and more black on their car, it is wearing off a little bit. What are your thoughts?
We've obviously got the tiers here: S, A, B, C, D. I think it's mid. I think it's a B for me.
I agree.
I don't think it's. I did like it when it came out, but now it's mid for me. I don't think it's okay, but it's not awful.
I would even consider putting it in C, because it's nice. It is nice, but when you compare it with the other 9 cars, which are 90% black as well, or 90% carbon, should we say, it just looks plain. I like the red. I like the white stripes. But apart from that, it's very plain. So I'm happy to go with you if you say B on this one.
I'm happy to concede this one to you. I'm happy to stick it in C.
I just think there's much nicer liveries. There are much worse, but there's much nicer as well. Now, moving on to what I consider to be the ultimate mid-tier livery, Red Bull. It's a nice livery, but it's the same every year. It looks identical to last year and to the year before and the year before and going back to like 2014. I cannot tell the difference between if there's any changes between the two.
If you've seen what I've done, I've changed DT to awful, because there's been no change to that Red Bull car in about 75 million years. Nah, I'm not having it. I just want something different from Red Bull, especially. Was it the Turkish Grand Prix in 2020?
2021, yeah.
2021, yeah.
Yeah.
That livery was something else. Can we just have a little bit of spice from Red Bull? But no, they've come out with this again.
It would be nice, to just vary up a little bit, maybe have a bit more of the yellow or a bit more of the red amongst it. But it's just, you've obviously got the red and yellow on the roll hoop and the front wing, and then the rest of it is just navy. It's just very plain. It's just very, you know what you get with Red Bull, and you just hope for a little bit of variation. But moving on to the third team, Williams, I quite like this car. I do quite like this livery that was released. I'm happy to go for a B. What are your thoughts?
I was about to say I'm happy to stick it with a D in the B. Especially have you seen the little Duracell battery thing that they've got on top of the car? I'm a massive fan of that. The little detail.
The perfect sort of like advertising, because you spot it and then you see you can't not see it, and it's shaped like a battery. It's got the bronze stripe on it as well. I think they put it in one of the races last season. I'm not sure which one, or a couple of them. But yeah, I'm quite happy that's on the car. I think that's worthy of bumping up, place it on its own. Yeah, so the Williams livery goes into the B category. Now, Alfa Romeo. I'll start off with your thoughts. Yes, I agree.
Top tier. Top. That is a gorgeous, gorgeous car. The change from white and red to this red and black makes it so good. It's gorgeous. I'm a massive fan of this livery.
It looks so much sleeker and so much nicer. And yeah, I agree. I think it looks very nice. Now, I know it's a bit of contradiction because it's got a lot of black on the car, but something about the red and black just works. It just works really, really well. So yeah, I'm especially with the white writing on it. I'm very happy to go with top tier for that one. AlphaTauri. Now, I don't think this is much needs to be mentioned on this one. Yeah, I'm happy to go with C. I know a lot of people don't like the reds.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think it's quite similar to the last livery. It's quite similar to this Red Bull. Not a lot has changed. We've added a little bit of spice to it, which probably keeps it in C. But yeah, I mean, not a lot has changed.
Well, it is pretty much the same, but it's got obviously the red on the rear wing and the side plates. From the front angle view, it does look very nice. I'm looking at the front angle here. It looks it does look nice. So yeah, I think it doesn't deserve to go in awful, but yeah, I think C is about right. Now, next up is McLaren. I'll let you go first on this one, because I think mine will be quite short with what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, again, people were hoping for Chrome, not that type of Google Chrome, a different Chrome, expecting the silver, something wacky, but they kept the papaya and they've added a bit of black and there's a bit of blue, there's a bit of everything in there. I think, again, some. I
would go awful for this one.
You'd go awful.
I would go awful. I think there's too much going on. If you get rid of the blue or get rid of there's too many different colours, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
It just looks very clutty. There's a lot there. I think the chrome wheel rims work if there's a little bit less going on the car, but with it all combined, it's just too much. And I think awful for this one. I don't think it looks nice at all. And on the other end of the spectrum, Aston Martin, I think we're next. Yeah, I'm happy to put them up in S. Yeah, I think it's a lovely car. Yeah.
Very nice. Once again, the last season design was good, and this season's design is once again top. Stick it there. Stick it in S.
Yeah, they've it's the British racing green. and the stripe, the slightly lighter, what's it? It's a greeny yellowy color. It just really looks nice. It really does look nice. Now I know what you're going to go up for the next one. The next one is Ferrari. I think I know where you're going to go, and I think we might disagree.
I'm not actually going to stick it in S.
Okay.
I'm going to stick it in B.
Well, I'm just going to put it in A because I think apart from that little black cutout on the side pod, which looks a bit stupid, it's a very nice car.
I was just saying B just because I didn't want to see him as a biased fan, but if you want to stick it in A, I'll stick it in
A.
No,
I'm happy to put it in A because it's got the vintage Ferrari writing on the rear wing, which I think bumps it up. It's just that cutout on the side, that black cutout on the side. It just doesn't need to be there. If it wasn't for that, I would put it in S. But one that I think we're both going to agree on that goes in S is this next one, Mercedes. This is don't you hover it above awful. This is one of the nicest liveries I have seen. It looks incredible. The blue Petronas marking on the side, the bold colours on the wheel rims, the driver numbers. It looks amazing, doesn't it?
I'd have to agree with you there, especially with it like I said, calling it the black arrows, not the silver arrows, because the black livery. But yeah, this takes us back in time of what happened with a certain Lewis Hamilton winning his championship. And maybe it could happen again this year. You never know. The black livery is back, but I'm not gonna get your hopes up. I'm just gonna say that we know what happened with the black livery last time, and it could happen.
Well, when I saw that it was released and it was they were back to black as they're being promoting, I did think, oh, here we go, it's the championship confirmed. So I'm choosing to ignore testing, and I'm going back to how I'm feeling when I saw the livery first released, and I'm gonna live in denial. I'm happy to live on that. I'm happy to stay on the Mercedes bandwagon, and moving on. Yes, to Alpine. This is an interesting one.
The only thing that puts me off with the Alpine is the massive BWT. I don't like it. It looks
disgusting.
I don't like the BWT. If it was all blue, it'd be here. It'd be an S. But because of a BWT and the pink, I'm happy to keep it as a C or even an awful.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's not so much the pink, it's the amount of it. Like I'm looking at the top view on it, where it's got it on the front wing and on the rear wing. And if it was just there, it would look quite nice. It looks quite nice on my screen here, the angle I'm looking at. But just the bit on the side, it doesn't work for me. So yeah, I think we'll stick it in C there. So that is our ranking done. So in S, we have Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, and Mercedes. In A, we have Ferrari. B, Williams. C, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Alpine, and then awful Red Bull and McLaren. So that summarizes our livery talk. And just before we go, well, it's predictions time for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So I've got two predictions here. I don't know if you've got the same. So my predictions is McLaren to have a double Q1 exit. I'm going big, I'm going bold. I think McLaren are going to have a double Q1 exit. And my second one is I feel like it's a little bit of a safer one. Sainz to get a podium. Because the Ferrari at the minute, I was debating whether to put in Sainz to get the win. I went for Sainz to get the podium, especially with the way that Ferrari is handling at the minute. It seems more suited to Sainz's driving style. What about yours?
Well, I had the usual top five, but if we're going by your basis and doing two predictions and then a top five, I'll go with one prediction: Logan Sargent to make it to Q2. I think he's got the potential to make it to Q2, and I will go with the handy trio on the podium of Leclerc, Verstappen, and Hamilton. I think those three will be on the podium. Those are my two out there predictions.
Okay.
Logan
We can
Sargent,
do a top five as well.
Sargent. Yeah, we'll do a top five, but I'm saying Logan Sargent, please do not let me down. I don't want to be cancelled. Thank you.
So a Logan Sargent podium and a top three of
Not podium.
what was it?
Podium. I said Q2 appearance.
No, sorry, Q2 appearance and a podium of Verstappen, Leclerc, and Perez, was it?
Hamilton.
So Hamilton, okay. So we're going to do top five as well. Are we going to do it for just qualifying or just the race or qualifying as well?
Or both.
Both. Okay. So do you want to start?
I'll begin. I think in qualifying, the top five will be Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Hamilton.
Interesting. I've gone for Verstappen on pole as well. Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton. And for the race, I've gone Verstappen, Leclerc as well. I've got that Sainz podium, gone for Sainz in third, and then Hamilton, Russell, fourth and fifth.
I've obviously said my podium, so Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, and then I'm going to go fourth place. I'm going to go Sainz, and making a wild appearance out of nowhere, I'm going to go Valtteri Bottas in fifth.
That's interesting. That's a bit of a rogue shout.
I think it's a rogue shout, but that man's got a mullet and a beautiful mustache. What could go wrong?
Exactly, that's all you need, isn't it? So we will most definitely get proven wrong. And here's to fingers crossed it is a Mercedes 1-2 in qualifying and the race. I'm sure you'll say Ferrari for
of course.
For yourself. But that is everything for the second episode of season 3 of the On the Grid podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you to discuss our terrible predictions in the next one.
Bye.